Welcome to Escapists Anonymous, the fantasy fiction book club. I'm Dan.
And I'm Sam. This is a podcast for people who love to read and who read to escape into worlds of magic and adventure. But don't let that adventure end when you finish your book.
Join us on Escapists Anonymous to carry on the conversation.
Well, another new episode. Usually we say another new book, but this time it's two books, Dan.
Two books.
Two fairly short books. And when we originally approached these as being individual episodes, I think both of us kind of agreed that these required a slightly different approach because they are slightly different books. So for this week, we've got Alice with a Y, Return to Wonderland.
By Anna James, is it?
By Anna James.
Yeah.
And Hekate the Witch by Nikita Gill. And I think thematically there's quite a lot of overlap in that they are reimaginings, revisions, revisitations of existing stories, one of which is a figure of Greek mythology, and the other is, a sequel to one of the most famous children's books of all time, which is a bold move.
Yeah.
And I think, they kind of pair with one of our fairly recent episodes, Lady Macbeth, which is, visiting a story well told, but a play and a figure, of quite, both history and drama.
And do you know what's really funny is that the recency, is that a word?
there might be a more correct word, but
the proximity of the original story's release affects, for some reason in my head, how I feel about these. So the fact that Macbeth would be like 16th century Greek mythology is like Greek mythology, ancient, makes it feel like those are slightly different to Lewis Carroll in the 19th century, which feels very recent in terms of
he's not even cold in the ground.
I know. Yeah.
Already you're trying to pick apart his stories and add to them.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, I think what's interesting is, so one of the approaches I had with both of these is the fact that I'm equally okay with both of them being done, because I'm very much of a mind that, we have a very modern conception of storytelling, and a lot of it is defined by copyright laws, and the idea that you're not allowed to touch someone else's story, whereas we've done it for so long. And I think the Hecate one is an interesting one for that because, there's no canon definition of who Hecate was, so you can play around with that story. And equally, why not do it with Alice in Wonderland? There's nothing to stop you, and other than legal reasons because of copyright. But before we go on, I'm just going to do some quick blurbs. Would that be acceptable? And then we can look at them both kind of like in conjunction, because I think to an extent that might be a good way to do it, but we can focus on one in fits and starts. So an interesting, I don't know if you realise this, but Hecate, which I'm going to read first, is the first book in the Goddesses of the Underworld trilogy.
Oh.
So it's actually, we've inadvertently started another trilogy.
Oh, God.
An electrifying, enraging retelling of the life of Greek goddess Hecate, child of war turned all-powerful goddess of witchcraft and necromancy by internationally best-selling poet Nikita Gill. Born into a world of fire, godling Hecate has never known safety. After her parents are on the losing side of the war between the ruling titans and the new Olympian gods, Hecate is taken by her mother Asteria to the underworld, where Styx and Hades agree to raise her. Meanwhile, Asteria is pursued across the world by Zeus and Poseidon, and to escape their clutches transforms herself into an island in a stormy sea. Orphaned and alone, Hecate grows up amongst the horrors and beauties of the underworld, desperate to find her divine purpose and a sense of belonging in the land of the dead. When Hecate finally uncovers her powers and ascends to goddess status, she realizes that even the most powerful Olympians are terrified of her. But when a mortal war breaks out again, threatening to destroy everything from Mount Olympus to the underworld itself, the goddess of witchcraft and necromancy is the only one who can bring the destructive conflict to an end. Now that tells most of the story of the entire book.
Yeah, pretty accurately as well. Like,
yeah,
there's no sort of misdirection going on. It's like a double bluff.
yeah. Oh, it can't be this. There's probably more to it. I mean, because that's because that kind of it misses out the bit where Hades steals Persephone or Kore.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes fully onto what is actually. I think it was actually a story that actually happened. The Gigantomachy. So that's the bit where the giants attack
the
Olympus.
Giant War thing.
The Giant War. That is the that's actually like I think it's a poem or a story that was from like late Hellenistic Greece, maybe. So is that canon for that one? And then Alice with a Y. England, 1919. Alice, with a Y, lives with her grandmother, the original Alice, having lost her father during the Great War. When a mysterious invitation to a tea party hits her square in the face, Alice realises her grandmother's strange stories of a place called Wonderland might have some truth to them after all. But the land Alice finds herself in feels different from the Wonderland of her grandmother's tales, for it is trapped in its own war. The Sun King and the Queen of the Moon are fighting over a stolen hour, and soon Alice is tasked with setting it right. With the help of the Mad Hatter, the Cheshire Cat, and a Sailor Fox, Alice will have to solve Wonderland's problems and eventually find her way home. Enter an enchanting adventure through Wonderland, featuring stunning illustrations by Matthew Land. So there you go.
I'll have to have a look. I've got the physical copy, but I obviously listened to the audiobook, and I hadn't realised that there was illustrations in there as well. So I'll go and take a look at that.
They're all right.
How good are you at illustrations, Sam?
I'm not
World
very
class.
unless it's a map. But I mean, they're nice.
Ooh.
Yeah, they're nice.
I like an illustrated hardback book. I mean that is it's a nice little hardback book, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that the hardback that you've got? Yeah, it's got the sprayed edges. It was so the reason I spotted that and suggested it was I think it's been nominated for one of Waterstone's Book of the Year awards. So it was on a display shelf as I was wandering around, and the lovely front cover and artwork and sprayed edges caught my attention, and I thought that'll look nice on my shelves. And so I picked it up, and here we are.
And the rest is history.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we're not that podcast.
No.
But yeah, what did you think of these two? I mean, I think the reason why we've decided to compound them into a single episode is because they were both nice, but I felt like I didn't have much to engage with. Yeah,
it's a little bit of uncharted territory for us, isn't it? Because I would almost call Alice with a Y a short story, given the length of it. Like I know the actual definition of that seems to vary depending on who you speak to, but
would you say it's a novella?
Well, yeah. I mean, at most, a novella. But Hecate is just something that I have no comparisons for. So Nikita Gill is a poet. She has written the whole thing in verse. And this was one of the things we were sort of texting about, and I was saying I was really glad that I listened to the audiobook for two reasons. One, because it was actually narrated by Nikita Gill, so I guess I got the way that she wanted to get the story across told to me. But B, I think I would have really struggled to keep my head in the actual plot. Yeah, with the verse, the way it's kind of set out in verse.
I'm similar. I had to work quite a little bit in order to follow it, almost kind of try not to read it in verse in order to focus on the narrative. And again, I usually do like a main read and then a skim read again to pick out bits that like I might have forgotten when I'm thinking through my notes, and again, it was constantly, my mind was just trying to read it like a book. I mean, it's presented like a book. I mean, when we arrived, I didn't realize it was a verse novel until I opened it. I was just like, what the? Oh, the first few pages are in verse. No, all of it's in verse. Oh, what is this?
In some sort of like iambic meter?
Yeah, no, this is how
like
it's presented on the page.
there are a set number of syllables,
and then every now and again you'll get one of these pages where you've got like just prose.
Oh, okay.
But, like, it's few and far between.
Yeah. So I'm sort of imagine. I think if I was looking at it and it was 10 syllables per line, I'd be reading it like we used to read Shakespeare at school. Almost.
Ti-tum.
Yeah. But I got a nice narration of it from Nikita Gill herself, which worked for me. It meant I could just follow the plot, and yeah, like there were some very obviously poetic bits. I think that she uses. I'm sure it's set out, that she'll use like repetition of the same word, I guess, at the start of lines to have like a dramatic moment, make more impact and things like that. And you can hear that in the audiobook as well. But it doesn't draw you away from actually what's going on.
Yeah. And I think as well that, poetry is so much more in the performance because, like the verse structure changes multiple times throughout the book.
Right.
So
okay.
I'm never kind of quite like, I'm not reading it with the correct rhythm or, I remember when I've read poetry in the past, which isn't a huge amount, if I'm perfectly honest.
Yeah.
But, quite often I would read the same poems over and over again to really get their understanding, like, The Wasteland, those kinds of things. There's a complexity to it that I really come to appreciate through repeat readings. And I feel just like, having to, read a book to try to, for this purpose in a way, almost kind of undermined it a little bit. And that's not to say I didn't really enjoy the story. I thought like, this is a really kind of interesting kind of bringing together of loads of different features of Hecate as a goddess into a narrative. And I think, Nikita Gill did a really good job of doing that. There was a coherence to the progression of Hecate as a character that, isn't usually present in a lot of how we piece together the stories of a lot of the gods of ancient worlds.
I mean, so my thing with, and it's not wanting to be negative, but did presenting it in verse add anything to the story? Because the way that Nikita Gill told it on the audiobook, it wasn't particularly kind of rhythmic or anything like that. So in the end I've heard it just as almost like a prose telling, and there are some bits where it's obviously she's used some poetic tools to make some more impact. But for me, if it was just all written in prose, I don't think that would have made a huge difference.
I don't think I agree. I think if they'd presented this as prose on the page, I would have enjoyed it just as much.
Yeah,
it's just it would have been a much shorter book because you wouldn't have had to have all the gaps between the stanzas. And then again, like maybe there isn't an understanding people get from being more familiar or well versed in poetry, but I just feel like because I struggled to find the rhythm. And, I know this sounds like a really dumb thing, but it doesn't rhyme. So I'm not like, okay, I can pick up on what this is trying to, or how I'm supposed to be reading this. So I did just read it as prose quite a lot. So it just meant that I was approaching it kind of normally how I read any other book. So maybe I wasn't quite doing it right. I don't know if that's the correct thing to say.
Think it came, I guess it got sort of, I guess it's interesting because I did the audiobook. Like, if I hadn't been talking to you, I wouldn't have known that it was written in verse.
Yeah.
So I guess I can review it almost in ignorance of that, and in some ways, and just kind of put that to one side and think about, okay, well, how was the plot told? It didn't. It's strange because it wasn't told rhythmically, you know, like you say, it didn't rhyme. It didn't feel like it was sort of using some sort of iambic meter.
Really basic? Do we sound really basic saying that?
Probably.
Like, where's the rhyming? It didn't. Hecate rhymes with loads of things.
yeah. Like ChatGPT, give me 10 words that rhyme with Hecate. So I guess then I go to characters, plot, you know, world building and what the features were, because, you know, we're looking at fantasy, you know, ultimately Greek mythology is fantasy fiction.
It's OG fantasy.
It's OG fantasy fiction, yeah. So, but it still didn't feel like something that I could compare to anything else in terms of the way that the plot.
But it sounded like what you were saying there, that your mind was almost doing that anyway. Like you were approaching it as prose.
Yeah.
It just, you know, so what do you think was that extra barrier? Because, you know, like what
possibly the actual length of the chapters then.
Yeah.
Maybe structurally that gives you this like super. So, you know, for context, for anyone that wants to listen to this and doesn't want to read Hecate, like the chapters are about, you know, one page. So I guess it was maybe sort of more plot led. It's interesting because it's told literally with this, you know, our focus is on one character throughout. But it didn't feel like it was sort of character driven, if you know what I mean. Like
no,
it was more kind of activity led.
Yeah, and you know, there's a purpose to each bit of it. There's the fleeing from Zeus and Poseidon. There's her going to try and find out elements of her powers. Going, you know, because the first bit is also about her coming to talk to her father. She ventures off into the underworld to go and find Perses, and then when she goes to find the Fates to find out more about powers, and she meets, I think it's the point where she meets Kronos as well, and then the third bit is, you know, those two bits of myth. So that's kind of driven by those various bits. But there's quite, I mean, like, I think it's interesting because, you know, Nikita Gill has pieced together a personality from just references. Like, I think the amount that Hecate gets mentioned in the Theogony by Hesiod is actually fairly minor, even though she's supposedly quite a major god at that point in time. But, you know, she's not one of the ones who feature within the myth necessarily. She's like, you know, interesting, when I looked it up, like Zeus is a big fan of Hecate, so it was quite interesting that Nikita Gill chose to change that element of it. You know, because one of the features that they know is that when Hecate is born, Zeus is like, I love her, loads of gifts. And so, you know, like, if you're piecing stuff together, and, you know, again, like, you don't have to follow the narrative, and there's bits that she ignores, bits that she changes, but one of her defining features is she is beloved by Zeus. So, you know, and that is really not a feature in this story.
No, not at all, no. I mean, it's weird because of kind of the inability to judge it against anything. It just came down to kind of a, did I enjoy it, yes or no type of question.
Do you feel because it's like you're almost like being told a Greek myth, and so for you on a literary level, that's not something you're like, oh, you're just telling me the story of a goddess, like in the same way that if you were recounted the story of the Odyssey, you know, you'd be like, all right, yeah, it's the Odyssey, cool.
I think some of it comes down to, you know, going back to like structural stuff, but like the length of it, you know, they're just, I think what we're used to as people that, you know, read and review fantasy and sci-fi books, and especially like we've been focusing on more modern releases, is like minimum 300 pages, you know, and like huge amounts of time to get to know characters, and, you know, like have that kind of personal relationship with a main character that with both
of these books, though, don't you feel that so much of that is already baked in? Like, you know who a lot of the figures are in these stories, in both this and Alice. Like, you know, Cheshire Cat is a universally known character, the Mad Hatter, and with Hecate, like Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, these are big names. Like, you can instantly recall certain features about these characters without ever having studied them academically.
Yeah, in some ways, I guess it just comes down to taste, doesn't it? It's like how, you know, I'm a big kind of characters person, and I want to kind of get inside main characters' heads, and I think there was some of it. Like it wasn't as though that was kind of totally bypassed, but I think because of the length of some of the chapters, and because it was just like so activity led, it was you sort of had to get an insight into what her feelings were, or her, you know, what her motivations were based on what she did, rather than what we would usually have is some kind of internal dialogue.
Well,
you know,
I feel like there is a fair bit of that. It's just because it's all Hecate, I feel a lot of the other characters she interacts with are largely abstract. You know, they're serving a function within Hecate's development as a character.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, Hecate, from what I've read around this, is a fairly unknown character. People speak positively about how she is caring and kind, and she helps people who wouldn't usually be helped, and all those kind of things. I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that being developed here. But it just means that every single other character, like Styx and Pallas, seem, you know, they're distant. Arguably, it's kind of justified because they're hiding secrets. But, you know, Thanatos as a love interest, I didn't really vibe with him. It's just like, oh, he's kind, he's about gentle deaths. It's like, yeah, okay, right, and that's the purpose he serves. He's fulfilling a function, and, you know, maybe that's intentional partly for what he does in the story. But yeah, it just meant that for me, I feel like I learned a lot about Hecate and who she was and who Nikita Gill wanted to portray her as. But the only other really kind of like strong emotions I felt about any other characters were, you know, Zeus, an arrogant, horrible creature who needs to be toppled. You know, I felt a real sense of kind of, you know, empowerment at the end, where Hecate is like, yeah, I saved you, Zeus, you're welcome. And he's just like, oh, but of course you could never marry Thanatos and have kids. And at the end she goes, yeah, I'm going to do that anyway, because it's not like it's that returning to status quo. And she realizes that he still thinks he's in charge and acts like it. But the story is telling us, well, no, she's not just going to go along with his rules.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to follow it. Like, but our instinct is to think, oh, of course, because that's how Greek myth works. And then Zeus said this thing would never happen again, and that was so because his word is law. And you know, that's a very modern element of it, where she goes, nah, I'm not gonna do that.
I mean, I think that's one of the big themes, isn't it? Sort of her sort of precociousness, or however you would frame it. Just she pushes boundaries. She's told not to do stuff, and she's like, I'm going to do that anyway. And yeah, so I enjoyed it. I wonder whether we should come on to Alice with a Y. And I think I did feel a little bit differently about this one, but I wonder whether that's more so because I immediately afterwards went and read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. But I mean, I enjoyed it. It wasn't that it was bad, but I feel like there's the Alice realizing that her grandmother's stories were true thing changes the original story, because it's all a dream. Like, literally, she wakes up at the end and it's a dream. Yeah,
and so's through a looking glass. Because that one again, she wakes up in the chair or whatever, is having fallen asleep in, you know, looking at the mirror, and she's like, oh, another wonderful dream. So I was surprised and was like, oh, and she got her granny's meeting her there and just been like, hello, yes, it's all real, confirmed.
Yeah. So I was a bit like, oh yeah, so we're actually we're not just kind of, you know, doing our own new take on it. We're sort of changing the ending of Lewis Carroll's two, you know, classic books here. I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, it didn't necessarily bother me that much, but
I think for me, it's about what we want to get out of it. Because I mean, you know, like, if they are just dreams, then they die with the original Alice, because, you know, but. By choosing to continue the story, she had to justify it, because how could the new Alice visit that same world and have it, you know, and know all the things that her grandmother knew, you know, experienced, you know? And yes, she told her the stories, and you could almost say like, oh yeah, but just when she turns up at the end, it's like, all right, well, there's no ambiguity around this, which seems kind of like an interesting choice. But again, it's that thing of, you know, do we hold these original stories to be sacred and you know, immutable, or do we just go like, yeah, continue that story, you've had a nice idea? I mean, I like the premise of this one as well. You know, it's the absurdity of British summertime, daylight savings time, or whatever it's known as in various countries. And I thought that was a really good choice, because I think it is a crazy thing that we have, and to place it within the absurdity of Wonderland felt very fitting.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting, having read both of them in the space of a week, like where the original basically, it doesn't really have a plot. It's just a fever dream. Like that's basically what's going on. Like she's followed a rabbit down a hole, and she keeps shrinking and getting bigger, and she's trying to find her way into this garden.
There's way more growing and shrinking than I remembered.
Oh, in the original, it's like every few pages she's like
found another cake.
Yeah, a mushroom, whatever it is. But it's just. It's like, I was thinking, I always say like, books are either plot led or they're character led, and I think in like Lewis Carroll's case, it's a bit of an exception to the rule, where it's just like whimsy led. It's like this is just an opportunity for me to try and be as clever and funny with the English language as I possibly can, and I thought Anna James was kind of trying to recreate that. Yeah. And she didn't do a terrible job of it at all. Like there was lots of kind of amusing wordplay, but when you go and compare it to the original, like it's a different thing altogether.
She's put a lot more structure into it. Again, it's almost like to compare it to video games. When you do a remaster or a remake of an old video game, there's a debate about whether you just copy it and you keep all the flaws of the original game in there, all the kind of things that are now antiquated, or whether you reimagine it more by putting in modern mechanics and as well as just like tidying up the graphics. And I feel with this, she was like, people have probably read Alice in Wonderland and they've forgotten how weird it is. So I'm going to give them what they think they remember Alice in Wonderland being, because it's filtered through, the Disney version from like the 60s or whenever it was.
Which is exactly the lens I was reading it through, because I hadn't read it before. So I'm thinking the Disney cartoons, and there's a sort of follow on. Yeah,
because the Disney version is a mix of both books, isn't it? Like Tweedledee and Tweedledum are in Through the Looking Glass. They're not in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. No. And there's a few others. And I think what Anna James did was she gave us a version of Alice that was very palatable to the modern day. Kind of similar to what Nikita did. Like, you're just taking these pieces of narrative and being like, right, rather than reconstruct the story, I'm going to continue the story, but give you because I know a few people who've tried to read Alice in Wonderland as an adult in the modern day and been like, I wasn't here for it. I didn't love it. It's all a bit all over the place, because it's a piece of like experimental fiction. It's playing around with ideas of narrative and absence of narrative.
I guess like my minor criticisms of it, and I did enjoy it, was obviously, like you said, this version, this retelling, reimagining, it did get a lot more structure, and it got this kind of mission within it. She's given this mission to go and end the war, and whilst I wasn't against the idea of that being something that Alice with a Y was going to go and do, I never really understood why she accepted this mission throughout. That it was one of those things where I wanted her to have a bit of motivation, like personally, and it was just like you need to go and speak to the king and queen, and just like, yep, all right, fine, and we just kind of accept that. And I get, it's supposed to be a short story / novella at most, and
we haven't got time to establish motivation.
No, but that seems like a pretty fundamental thing to if you're going to have that structure, put that motivation in with it.
But then that's the trade-off you kind of have to make with writing one of these stories in the modern day, is like for instance, the Sailor Fox. Like, I kept expecting him to have more of a kind of a personality or a function in the story other than being, I'm the person who's standing next to Alice for when she talks, so that she has someone to talk to. Because I didn't really get what his personality was. Like, within his booth, he seemed to have more of a thing. It's like, oh, the papers, I need the papers. The moment he leaves, he loses any kind of semblance of, oh, I'm here for this. And, he occasionally is a little bit weird, but he is very functional as a character within the plot. And I was going like,
we're not allowed to change size. It's like, oh, go on. He's like, all right then.
Yeah. But I for so much of the book, I was like, he's the time being. He's going to be the time being at the end. Just you wait. And at the end, he was just like, no, I'm just a sailor fox, and off I go.
There is no time being.
Yeah, and it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, of course, this is a playing on the idea of these nonsensical stories. So the absurdity of it is fine. There can be no time being. Sailor Fox doesn't have to have a purpose, but it doesn't mean that I'm not kind of like, well, then why is he here? Just leave him in the booth. Yeah.
Well, I guess it was for the emotional moment where he went up to be the new constellation, and that was actually quite moving. I was quite surprised by how touching that actually was, that moment.
It was nice. It was nice.
I guess what you're saying is like, can you justify the entire book as a setup for that moment with him just kind of floating along without, and he doesn't even have his own motivation to go with that. And it's another thing, like he's now on this mission. There are two people on a mission without any motivation whatsoever,
and at the end he's so lacking in purpose. It's like, yeah, right, I'll just change my existence into becoming a constellation. And also just the one up there. So who else are they going to get to become new constellations? But then at the same time, like, there is that sad like, I think there was a really good element of this, of having that undercurrent of sadness and loss. Her father, the boat she's sailing in, he's such a presence within the story, even though he's so absent because of his death. And then you see the constellations dying out, all these characters, all these things being just like, and not even seeing their destiny, they're just winked out of existence. It's like, oh, those ones are gone too, those ones are gone too. Just the falling away of reality as it all crumbles. It's like, you see it so many times in animations and kind of fantasy films where reality itself is destroying and you're left with just the bare bones of the people who caused the conflict. They're at a core of nothingness and they have to rebuild. And World War One is a very good backdrop for that, because of the amount of people who died, all those stars that were winked out for seemingly a petty conflict of just the elites arguing over who gets to keep an hour, and someone argues they shouldn't even taken it in the first place. And I think both of these books do a good job of having these kind of characters question the elites. Hecate's there for that. She's there to make Zeus feel unnerved and know that at any point she could choose to just rise up. And similarly, you've got this attack on the elites who are squabbling over stupid things, and they're absurd for all of it, and they don't care for the number of lives that are lost.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my only other minor criticism was like the ending, like the compromising, like the daylight savings thing. I was just like, I know obviously you had to get to a point where daylight savings time was the solution to the problem, but the whole kind of basis is like, clever wordplay and like all of this stuff, and I just wanted the solution to be a bit kind of more witty and whimsical and clever, not just well, you have it in the summer and I'll have it in the winter, and that I was a bit like, oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah. I think Anna James did a good job at mirroring a lot of the structure, but it also felt at times like, oh, I need to have this in, like, in Through the Looking Glass, Humpty Dumpty's in it, and in this one she put the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker into it. Like, oh, I need to have a reference to a nursery rhyme. When you said it's like being presented as one of Waterstone's books of the years, I'm surprised, because it feels like a really fun little thing to have read, but at the same time a little bit throwaway. I don't think it really kind of like, it doesn't stand up against the original two. No. It's a fun addition, and again, like, I'm really open to these kind of books that continue what are seen as hallowed stories, similar to Lady Macbeth from a few months ago now. It's this thing of, like, who says we can't change these stories? Like, stories are living, breathing things. You can reimagine Hecate and do what you want with it, because there was never any canon to it anyway. Like, the only ones that we have were written down by poets several centuries after the point at which was the high point of this goddess existing. Like, I think we should have more of this, and I really enjoy them, and we'll probably get some absolute classics out of it. I know there's also the more cynical side of it, where we've got Disney being like, oh, what if we had the two evil sisters from Cinderella, if they were actually the ones who were a bit misunderstood? Like, they're just mining it for to be like, where else can we get stories out of existing IPs? Whereas I feel like some of these are genuinely heartfelt approaches to love of these stories, wanting to have new voices and new takes on what are quite staid and set things, especially the goddess stuff. Like, I think I would love to see more of this. And, like, we're seeing a revisionist kind of like more generally of Greek myths. Like, in the Hades video games, it's so much more focused on the chthonic deities. Hades is a much more kind of like, well, not necessarily positive presence. He's got a lot more depth than he's traditionally had, like, compared to the Disney Hercules.
Have we read much else that's got that? I mean, I'm drawn. My head goes to like Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief stuff. That's all based around Greek gods and Greek mythology. I haven't read any of them. I've seen, I think, maybe one or two of the films, but I'm surprised that we haven't come across more in our fantasy readings that are linked to that, because given how fair game it is for use and revision, and like the lack of challenge that you're going to get based on the age of it, like it would seem to be a great starting point for fantasy stories, wouldn't it?
But it's also very easy to have them as, like, in your own fantasy world, have loose analogues. Like, you can have kind of figures who very much fulfill the same roles, and people are like, all right, this is a Zeus character. Oh, or this is one that inverts the Zeus character.
Yeah, and I guess we do see it, like, perhaps Hannah God Killer is that, like, gods of certain things. You've got old gods versus newer gods, things like that. But I guess we should probably wrap up there. And yeah, I mean, if you've read either of or both of these books, what did you think? What would you compare them to?
Similar things that you've read. And also, I'd really be interested to hear what people's takes are on, like, do you think that people, like with Alice with a Y, do you think people should be leaving those stories alone? Is it just cashing in on someone else's success? Is it something where, like we've seen with the James Bond stories being continued, we're having other people pick up elements of Lord of the Rings and putting it into TV shows? Where's the line for you? Do you think it's all fair game, or is there things that you do and don't want to see when someone's continuing someone else's story? Like, it's that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of debate territory there that's really fascinating.
Yeah, let's get controversial. Get into the comments. If you're watching us on YouTube, leave us a comment down below, like and subscribe while you're here. We really appreciate that. We'll always respond to all the comments. Social media at Escapists Anonymous Pod on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Leave us a message or comment on any of our posts there, and we will interact with you. In the next episode, we are going to discover for the first time cozy fantasy in the form of Sangu Mandana's A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping.
There's a lot of information to hold in my head there. So looking forward to discovering yet a new sort of subcategory of the fantasy genre. I wonder if it's going to be the case that, like similar to Hecate, I opened it and I realized it was all poetry. I would open that and go, oh, this is actually an instruction manual. Right. Yeah. I mean, it looks pretty long if it's going to be an instruction manual. I'd fully expect to be able to run a magical inn if that's the case. But if you're listening, watching in real time, then you can pick that up and get reading ahead of the next episode. But in the meantime, we'll just thank you for watching, listening, wherever you're doing so. And yeah, we'll see you next time. And it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.